Today is October 22nd, 10:06 a.m. and we are going to commence the City of Castle Hills Parks and Project Commission. And thank you for coming.
I think on the second agenda item with the minutes, we're going to have to finish those from the last meeting.
Okay.
No, Matt wasn't here, so we can, Brenna can work some up this week, and then we'll have 2 sets of minutes for the next meeting.
Okay, that'll work. Discussion and possible action on identified projects in the commons, playground and shade structure and other amenities.
Okay, thank you. So I didn't, since we're sitting kind of down here, I have the handout here. We'll go through it real quick. And then we'll put this online later. But last meeting you had asked as a group to kind of come back and put together some ideas on a playground, shade structures, bike rack. And so got with our engineers and some of the vendors as far as the cost and everything. And so just kind of labeled here that playground, shade structures, bike racks. This page here, this is obviously the master plan that everybody is aware of. So we have that obviously going forward. Then the next page is the playground, I think, that's been identified so far by a number of folks. It was the one I think that had the most hands raised out of the 3 at the public town hall meeting from that standpoint. And then I think it's one, and if y'all don't know, the Castle Hills Women's Club donated $10,000 towards the playground. So, and I know that some of them have seen this playground, and this is sort of choice. And so I use this as sort of the guideline going forward, but it has a cost of $38,000 plus 25%. The 25% is for installation, shipping. It also comes with the surfacing. They call it the fall surfacing, which is, I think it's the rubber or the wood chips and everything like that. And then of course, setup and everything like that. It's a little timbers, they call it. So this is all inclusive, 38,000 plus the 25% here. On the side there is just an example of a particular shade structure. I think they probably sat out at about 3,000-4,000 with shipping, but that's just an idea of the height of a potential shade structure for this particular playground. No. So, I mean, all inclusive, we're looking at this particular playground, that shade structure to accommodate the size of this, give or take probably closer to 60,000, I think, from that standpoint. I know the mayor wanted to be here, but I think he had another commitment this morning, but he was going to give an update on where he was at. I know he's been working to fundraise a large portion of this as well. So, and not to say that any portion can't be presented to city council as a match or a partnership as we finish this up. But I think from a Parks and Projects Commission, it would be helpful if y'all I think took action at some point to say, this is exactly what we want. And so we have an idea for our engineers and Terra Design that we're working with to put the entire thing together. So, and ultimately, I think the idea is that we'd bring the package of the cost of the playground and shade structure to city council. And I would probably say, hopefully it would probably be early next year, if not January, my goal. So we can get this in the works, shipping, installation, give or take probably a few months to have this up and ready by early spring. Okay, next slide. This is some shade structures. We've talked about it. Or excuse me, this is a representation right now of an aerial view. This is showing 2 shade structures right there. And then of course the playground in the corner. I asked them just to provide an aerial view, not to say this is where the shade structures would go, but it just gives you a perspective of the size of shade structure that's been priced out. And I'll get to that slide as well. But obviously the shade structures here that are placed here can go anywhere within the commons. This is just an idea to show you how much square footage or footprint from an aerial standpoint it takes up. The next slide there is, I asked them to put together sort of a rendering to show from the essentially the Lemonwood, and I'm not sure why it duplicated this. Yeah, it's like a
Effects,
double.
yeah.
It's like a double take, but it essentially gives you an idea from a Lemonwood perspective what that looks like, and where an idea that might go. And of course, you could see the shade structures, what they put together in the background. Not to say that those are the shade structures that would be put in, but it just kind of gives you an idea. I think the shade structure they're using back there is like the ultimate size that we would consider as far as height, length, and probably price at this point. But that gives you sort of a view from Lemonwood. You know, I'm not sure why it duplicated here on my presentation, but the idea is that, you know, the children can cross the street right there, and it's right there at the corner. And I know the bollards or barricades are there, but obviously we could price out that fence to be there. So I did when I found, so interesting enough, the Parks Warehouse, where I was able to find some quotes on some other things with our engineers, is where we got the water fountain that was donated by the Castle Hills Women's Club. And they had all kinds of things that were bollards, of course, park benches and trash can receptacles, but they had a number of bollards that were actually like aesthetically looked nice, that you can actually place there instead of the wooden bollards that would be sort of deterrent for vehicles there and everything, maybe instead of a fence. So,
Okay, right.
yeah, so I can probably put some of those together if we want to take that next step as we move forward, determining if we want to have bollards there.
How about
Or-
those big rocks? Square.
I think we can price those out.
Then you
you
can
know?
sit on them too, you know.
Yeah, interesting enough, I don't know if you've seen the ones that were installed Mr. Carter put at his house on South Winston.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and he told me how much he paid for those and those size. So that is actually a choice or a possibility. So so we kind of have three options there: fence, bollards, or large boulders.
Right.
So that's a rendering. And what I'll do is actually send this back out to everyone so they can see it electronically as well. And the next slide is a shade structure. So the one in the top right corner there, that's 50 by 50 by 9, is actually the one that's in the illustration there in the commons, I believe, as the largest size. And with engineering, installation, delivery, everything, that's right around 65,000 at the height for cost. But that's, again, the largest shade structure and what's shown actually in that aerial to be identified as a possibility. I put in other shade structures there for prices. I know one of the ones in the bottom right corner you've seen before, that one is about 25,000. That you could actually put fans and lights on and then put benches underneath, and you could put it to the right or left of the commons along the sidewalk. And then of course, this is another example of a shade structure to cover a playground there for about 7,000. This one was a little bit higher, I think, and further in length to cover sort of a playground like ours versus just the other illustration that had the higher poles and the matting there. So I think this one's a little more durable, obviously, with the cost. So, but I just wanted to give you an examples because I know the idea was to show exactly what was in the rendering, and that is the one for about 65,000. Yeah. And this one doesn't take too much space. It can be off to the side.
Yeah.
The only thing that Councilman Joyce, I know, asked, and they couldn't get a price and they're working on it, is with the solar one. So I'll have that at a later date I can send out. So they were trying to get some last minute pricing on that.
Solar to power the lights and things.
Yeah. Or if and I asked them to put together, which they're working on, because there was an idea of actually if we did like a I guess a more, I don't say durable, but actually like a gazebo looking one. that was larger, gazebo with a roof and everything, a better structure, everything. Obviously, that's going to drive the price up, but what that might look like with solar on there as well. So we'll have two prices next time for choose from.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Ryan. And I think that brings up the other question that the mayor really seemed to be advocating for something more substantial like that.
Mhm.
Maybe so that we could put solar panels on a real roof. But anyway, it's,
Yeah, and the other one too is that it's going to take a little longer too to work on is the pricing is if we actually put bathrooms out there. So if we had a structure out there with bathrooms, so they're working on that price as well. So, the next one is just another example of shade structures there. You know, some have, I've seen some parks right there in the top right that says 5,500. It's like I think the cantilever type where you can have a couple park benches under there as well. The bottom right is sort of, again, just shade covering in general that could be out there. And then of course the one for like 8,400, that actually is something that would be a little bit smaller than what's in the illustration, from that standpoint at the 60 some thousand. So. And then the last one, I know this was brought up as a price, and so we put in there bike racks. So there's two examples of just bike racks, whether we want to put in the wave looking one right there, a little more expensive, versus just a traditional bike rack there for about $400. So that seems to be pretty inexpensive and something that can be done pretty quick, obviously, probably within this budget. If y'all wanted to choose.
would Rick do that, Brian, or that be a contractor?
No, Rick can do it. I have faith in him, in this guys.
I like the wavy one.
But yeah, so and then they had the stand,
Yeah.
and then there's ones they had the standalone ones where you could put like 2 or 3 individual ones like this. You know, probably a couple $100. So, but yeah, I mean, if it's something y'all wanted to do quickly, we could probably get some bike racks out there.
Yeah.
So, but right now I just, this is sort of preliminary and numbers and obviously today is just to talk about what you think as far as moving forward, and then the next meeting bringing back some more firm numbers on an actual structure like a gazebo and or bathrooms out there to decide on as well. So I would think so, sir, possibly. Well,
We have three bars on each position. Those two, you can double the number of bikes that you have. The other is, it's small enough and wide enough. We don't close it down to concrete, somewhere pick it up.
yeah, I know it. Legs not included.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rick has a guy who does the concrete work, flat work. We could definitely bolt it down. So.
Right.
Bikes in a rack.
Yeah.
But I think as we move forward, and I know as a group, as a commission, it's trying to figure out how, in what direction we want to essentially bring this down to a package to deliver to council based on donations and what the priorities are of the commission. Obviously, we know playground is first, shade structure, and then whatever else you'd like to see as amenities moving forward. But I'm optimistic that if we can try to put something together here as a group and then get it to council, that we could probably have something out there in early spring, both a playground and shade structure. I don't see why not. Now, if we're talking about something that has to be built like a gazebo or bathrooms, obviously we're talking a little bit longer, but I'm optimistic that, you know, we could have playground and shade structures by Fiesta Castle Hills if we really put our heads down and move forward. So
Word. Well, let's have a discussion. Start with you, Cindy. Right.
and one of the things I like, I mean, in the one rendering with the one you can put fans and lights on is it's a combination because if it's high enough, you can put vendors underneath for Fiesta Castle Hills, but then also just in general, any event out there at night can provide some relief to folks out there.
Right.
And again, I think it's just a matter of this group figuring out where those things want to go. I think we have a good idea where the playground should go, but where and what shade structures should go out there is kind of the plan. Mhm.
When we get questions like this, where there's multiple choices of different things, we put together a package and have it so we could send it around to everybody that's on the committee, take 10 minutes. And just have them check off which ones they like. Then it would go back to the chairman of the committee and they'd make a consensus document, like, you know, whichever ones were picked most, selected most, but, and then send that out back to the committee and say, this was a consensus of what everyone on the committee wanted. You know, does anyone have any real objections to that? And generally, for most of the time, it goes very smoothly.
Yeah.
And we just go with those, with the consensus. Sometimes someone will bring a real strong argument why, or to settle a tie, you know, because if you, in the case where we have 10 people on a committee, you can have ties, you know, so we always try to have an odd number of people on committees so that lessens the chances of there being tied. But what do you think about that idea of, you know, rather than discussing it right here, and but if you send it to everyone, think about it, check off the ones we want, send it back, somebody compiles the consensus, and say, this is what our group wants. And it goes remarkably fast that way.
I have no problem with that. I think at some point though, we need to, if we're talking about particular shade structures, where they would go, getting with Judy and Norma, Fiesta Castle Hills committee, and making sure as a stakeholder they're comfortable with it as well. So
I agree. Now, when you show this picture of where the aerial view of the shade structures, this is kind of my recollection of when we had the meeting where everyone was talking about, let's have a shade structure back here and then one kind of in front of the fire station. And so the way you have it here is what I remember, what I recall of the way we wanted it.
Go catch him real quick. See.
I'm sorry. Am I talking too much?
No, I just Bernard might go check and see. Yeah, he's chairman. But I think ultimately, yeah, getting them involved as stakeholders. But
Absolutely.
I
But we put it together and then once we've argued it out and we're all have a consensus agreement, then ask the stakeholders and say, this is what we've come up with. Let us know what you think.
okay.
So what you're suggesting, Vic, is that we basically list the criteria, the potential criteria for these different things.
Well, you know, just taking this document that he has here with the different state structures, you know, what the different choices are.
Yeah.
You know, we could put our preferences, which one we like. Like I stated here, I like the one with the lights. So I would probably pick that one over the more, you know, the 65,000, the bigger one. But other people might want the bigger one for, you know, what they're envisioning. So it was just the idea of taking these same pictures and have a box that you could check and say, I like this one, I like this one. And then come up with, you know, once we have which one's got the most checks. Exactly.
It. Yeah, location, I think, is a big, like Ryan was saying,
Well, I mean, if you look at the renderings, I mean, that those are just ideas of where the large shade structures could go.
right,
But it's not to say that you couldn't have two different types of shade structures out there. One large one and then one like the one that has the fans and lights on it. I mean, I would just hope that they match from a aesthetic purpose, but
Mhm. Well, for instance, on the picture where the aerial view that shows the location, you could just use that same picture and say, do you like this location? Or would you rather have them in a different place? Again, just a yes or no. And if you get more no's, like, no, we don't like where they're sitting. Then you have to go back and ask the stakeholders where they want it.
nice.
It's kind of an iterative process.
Yeah.
But it, for us, it's always moves things along pretty quickly. Because if our committee itself would spend like multiple meetings deciding on things, then it prolongs the whole process.
Right.
But you've done a great job here, Ryan, and the engineers, putting this together from the last meeting to this one. This is great. This is a significantly better than last time. But I think we're at the point now where we can actually choose.
Yeah. I like the placement of the playground because it's away from the street, on the other side of the sidewalk, inside the circle, I guess,
Oh, and one last point is like
Yeah.
I'm showing my bias here. I'm saying what I personally like,
Mhm.
but that's process of letting people choose and then going with it's voting. It's democratic.
Right.
It's whichever one gets the most votes. The committee then has to move things along quickly. The committee has to say, well, more people wanted it that way. So even though it's not my personal preference,
Right.
it's the committee's decision. It's just committee 101 basics. And that's hard sometimes because I served as a chairman of a committee several times, and I wanted to dictate the way that I wanted it. And that was a rare event when that happened. Usually,
Well, I think ultimately whatever we choose, we need to say this is exactly what we're going with after that discussion. And then I think there needs to be a final document that our folks from Terra Design can put together to say, here's exactly what the illustration looks like, where this particular shade structure is going to go.
yes, sir.
Here's what the playground, all of those things as a final product to have it ready for council and then to be able to promote moving forward.
Exactly.
And I think, again, I think that's what part of that is when the mayor was fundraising and they just needed to know what they're paying for. So we need to be able to show them this is our end goal. So
I think that's perfect. And would that fit into the time frame that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Before?
I mean, quite honestly, I mean, I think the playground could move pretty fast. It's just a matter of ordering and getting it here and set up. I think that those are.
Any idea what the lead time on those things is, Ryan? That's what worries me.
I was thinking maybe even 6 weeks. He mentioned. I have to go back and look at my email. I know that the other one that we were considering, they could have had that up pretty much installed already because that was the one they use at TML. But
Right.
I think it was of no benefit to really the kids based on that particular model. But I'm optimistic that you could probably order within 6 weeks. So, but I'll check on that Monday for sure.
So does that suggest that we probably need to, as a committee, make our decisions probably by December so that Bernard can take it to council in January?
Yes.
And leaving plenty of time, you'd have 6 weeks, plenty of time, right? Fiesta's April, right? Early April?
April. Yeah. So once I find out the time frame, because I think if there's two particular vendors here. The one vendor that did some of these in the renderings, if you see the one that was done where the one shade structure is for like 65, I believe, or excuse me, not 65, but the one for 25
Mhm.
and 7,000, for instance. And on the next slide, the 8,400 and the 7,000 particular, those are from one vendor in particular. They're the same ones who did the structure out here for the PD. So, which that at the time cost us, I think, about 20 some thousand, low 20 some thousands. But I think that we could order those pretty quick and get those installed because a couple of years ago, those were installed pretty quick. So, and I was going to start pricing because I'm already getting a demand from other employees about having some out there for them.
Right.
So, but but they were paid, that was paid out of forfeiture, from that standpoint. So police had that advantage, yes.
Yeah.
So, but
Any more discussion on the playground? Let's, I wanted to see if we could move forward because shade structure, like placement and style is kind of, not quite sure yet.
Yeah.
But playground, I think we're pretty set on where and what. So,
and I think ultimately when we start talking with council and Councilman Joyce and, I think for the most part, we can fundraise most of the playground costs, I think we start talking about shade structure and then that might be an impact to, sort of the ARPA funds
Mhm.
moving forward. So that would be my first choice. If not seed money to pay for this. So there's no impact to the general fund. So at least we have two options of funding that don't impact the general fund or tax rate.
right.
So I think obviously at this point is when we need to take advantage of this in the next few months to settle on something and get it through council.
I like the turnout. What we think it should be, so at least that would be one thing that's on the plan that we can, when we move forward, to come to the shade structure, at least we've got the playground.
Right.
And I think it should be, I'm not saying that, like, for instance, we need to go with this color because it matches what PD has out there.
Right.
But I think whatever we decide for shade covering for the playground, whatever shade scrubber, we just need to make sure, obviously, there's some uniformity to it. And I think once we get some uniformity to those, is sort of down the road is when we can start getting some matching benches and matching trash can receptacles and
Right.
so that should be the end goal from a standpoint, because right now we have a combination of colors and shapes and sizes with things out there, so
Which is fine.
just an FYI.
Right. Okay, well, I want to suggest that we move forward with the playground in some capacity today. How would you, what do you need to move forward more with playground, as in cost or?
So if this is the playground we want, I need to move forward with the process of putting it's basically entire package together
Uh-huh.
to show what the cost is and shade structure and everything like that. So, because ultimately I think there's no reason why we shouldn't put some type of shade structure. And the one that's the illustration with the playground is probably the best example of the height and necessary coverage for a playground like
Right.
that, and that might give us an idea of where we want to start, because if we like the shade structure and color, then we should probably focus on the next shade structure matching that as well.
Right.
So that'll give us a good head start.
Okay, so I would like to take a vote on moving forward with the playground and shade structure above the playground, but basically the placement of the playground and the playground itself, so Ryan can move forward with getting exact numbers and moving forward that way, so we can come back and ultimately go to council with it. That work?
I
think so, Bernard. If that's a motion, you
Yes,
just need a
that's a
second.
motion that I'm making, so,
I'll second that.
all in favor? Aye.
And so I think next meeting, I'll probably have firm numbers on some type of structure that would be out there.
Okay.
But, again, ballparking numbers for a gazebo like that, you're probably talking about, if I had to, a couple 100,000, with solar, but then, a structure, for instance, like my last city I worked in Brenham, before I left, we did a project to put in a structure for bathrooms at one park. And at the time, this was 6 years ago. I mean, it was about 500,000. So,
Yeah, I think San Francisco just put in one for what, 1.9 million, 1.7, somewhere in there.
so just know that's what we're looking at from that aspect.
Okay.
And if I may just add one thing about the solar panels, I learned this week that the gentleman who is writing our sustainability section, his name is Alan Montemayor, he's a former professor and sustainability expert. He's going to recommend that we put solar panels on the firehouse because he says the orientation is perfect. The roof appears to be good. We need to verify that the roof's got enough life left in it to justify that. But he thinks that would be a perfect location. And in my humble opinion, I think it's a more appropriate location. If we have a little gazebo with 8 sections to it, I can't envision putting solar panels on that. With respect to the mayor, I think we're better off going with a larger building so we get more bang for the buck. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Like the electrical and everything's somewhat there, like the routes and, right. Okay, well, let's move on to the next agenda item. Discussion and possible action on the prioritization of the Commons conceptual plan, including future recommendations to city council. Any discussion on this topic? Right. State structures, yeah. Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is a suggestion that we have one of the committee, perhaps Bernard would be the appropriate one, just come before council next month and kind of give them an update.
Okay.
Because we had that public meeting a couple months ago now, or maybe it's 1 month and a half, whatever it was. And I think they're kind of anxious to know where are we? What's the
Perfect.
story?
So
And
that would
then
be the
maybe-
November meeting.
Yes. Just an update. And then if we're ready in December, fine. But if we're not ready till January, the full recommendation.
Right.
I second that.
Nice.
We behind.
Perfect.
Wait,
Yeah,
behind.
yeah, wait.
We'll help you.
Yeah.
Depending on how it goes.
Yeah. All right, I think we covered that one. Let's move on to 5, update on the city's comprehensive plan. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all may recall that the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee was actually born out of this committee about 2 years ago. So there's a direct link to this committee, so we feel it's our obligation to keep you all updated. And I have recommended a schedule to the leadership of our committee that we come before this group in December, whenever our December meeting is, and make a presentation of the comprehensive plan. And also in front of council, in front of the community as well. So that's the goal. One of the big things about this plan was we really wanted it to be citizen focused. So there are a lot of activities that involve the citizens. You may recall a year and a half or so ago, we had the survey. We had a very nice response to the survey with 240 people responding, so we're very pleased with that. After that, we had the speakers forum in the summer of 21, I believe it was, where we had a dozen or so sort of experts on master planning type topics come talk to us. And that seemed to be very successful as well, although it was all on Zoom. But we had altogether, we had a couple hundred folks who tuned in for those various discussions. And then, of course, the last piece was the workshops, which were held last fall. And out of the workshops then came these priorities from the architects. Council had allowed us to have $55,000 to bring them in. LPA did a terrific job. They helped us identify what the priorities really were. And so out of that series of workshop came these documents that are up here. And I think those are essentially the recommendations. Now you have a table of contents in front of you there, and I guess the categories will kind of be live, work, grow, play, and all of those priorities will be discussed under there. And just to kind of review them very, very quickly, one of the top priorities was to improve pedestrian mobility, walkability, because we want to be a more walkable, more healthy city, not all run by cars. And so that's one of the top ones. And so there's some ideas for how that might happen, where walk lanes, sidewalks might be installed. There'll be ideas for that. Same thing with bikeway infrastructure. I think one of the great opportunities with bike infrastructure is to connect Military Highway all the way up to Hardberger Park. And if we had our, if we had our own little network of bike lanes, that could be very, very nice. And it could also draw people, San Antonians, down into Castle Hills to do business here on some of those Military Highway and other businesses. So there's great potential there. Another priority was improving neighborhood connection, because that 410, as you guys know, highway is, a separator. That really is a barrier. And so we're going to look at, probably focus on honeysuckle. Blanco is such an animal that it's really very difficult to deal with that. West Avenue is not much better, but honeysuckle is less traveled. And we're thinking about enhanced lighting, maybe paint the overstructure a different color of one kind or another. Actually, I ran into at one of our recent events in the Commons, a gentleman by the name of Bill Fitzgibbons, who is a rather well-known public artist. And he's the guy that does all those light things downtown, with the structures, with the highway structures, with the lights going on and off in different colors, and the wings at the airport, all that kind of stuff. That's him. He's a Castle Hills guy. So I'm going to invite him to share some ideas for how that might happen there. So anyway, that's the neighborhood connection idea. Improving green infrastructure is another priority. Just getting more trees out here by City Hall. Maybe some of the land, maybe we can work with NEISD and make some nice gardens out there in some of their vacant land there, which is just a drainage ditch, really. But one of the really interesting ideas that has come out of this is the idea of a linear park, where you take an existing drainway and turn it into a park. There are ways that you can treat it so that when it rains, the water will flow through without eroding everything. But there could be, beautiful landscaping and benches and maybe even sculpture along some of those things. One of our committee members, Ogdell Rivera, that's what he does for a living. He used to do it for San Antonio. Now he's with the River Authority. He manages those kinds of projects all over San Antonio. So anyway, improving green infrastructure is a priority. The next one is creating a city center, a focal point for our community. And what I think that means is really enhancing this campus that we have here. This committee's already been working on the public space, the commons area. Mr. Middleman and I have actually come up with a proposed redesign of this building, floor plan for this building, which we'll publish as well as part of the comprehensive plan. But just where there's more community focus, we heard a lot about wanting more community facilities. And, in an ideal world, a new building would be wonderful, but I think that's so many millions of dollars, it's probably not realistic. But if we can achieve some of those goals with what we have, one of the ideas is to take the community room and put it on this side. of the building and put the restrooms over here next to the community room so they could be used by those in the commons. So, just sensible things like that that don't cost $20 million. But anyway, the idea of the city center is an important one. And then establishing Military Highway as kind of our main street. And that means enhancing bike routes, enhancing pedestrian routes. Maybe the right of way becomes a pedestrian street all the way up and down Military. Maybe even change some of the zoning along there so that we could have perhaps mixed use facilities with offices below and maybe residences above. Maybe even some of the residential areas on the southern part of Military could be a little bit more dense. Maybe they could have townhomes. Rather than just one big old single family house, maybe they could have townhomes there, which would enhance the activity and enhance the need for connection all the way up and down. So anyway, that's the idea of Military as main street in a word. And then, of course, the last idea then is considering land use and zoning changes. And I hinted at some of that on Military, but there's other areas where we might think about that as well. For example, West Avenue, on the east side of West Avenue, it's such a busy avenue. I can't imagine it's pleasant to live along there. So if that were more commercial or maybe higher density residential with townhomes, condos, something like that, maybe that would make more sense in that area. And actually another idea that is kind of, well, all of this is going to be controversial, you all know that, but anyway, the idea on Gladiola, which now backs to those big, beautiful two new buildings, actually they back to the parking lots behind those two beautiful new buildings. Maybe that could be one street that is designated for more dense housing, like townhomes or condos or garden homes or something like that. A little bit different than what's there. So we're slightly increasing density. We don't ever want to jeopardize the fact that we're a single family community. That, all of the houses within are precious. But on the perimeter, on the periphery where we got noisy highways and noisy big streets, maybe on those edges, maybe it's okay in there to go a little bit more dense. So anyway, but that's something that's going to be suggested for study. I don't think we're just going to say that we need to do this. Because there's so many issues and questions and it's got to have to be so much community input. But I think we need to do more study too. What is the impact to values? If we do those kind of things, what is the impact to traffic? Right. If we have a bunch of townhomes all of a sudden, and what does that mean? Jackson, yes, that's exactly right, Cindy. And that's on the list. Exactly right. And I think Jackson Keller is probably where we would start with the greening infrastructure, because that lousy drainage ditch on the side there across from there, it goes down, I don't know, it's 400 or 500 yards long, whatever it is, but that's awful. But thanks to Ryan, we have a good relationship with the city of San Antonio now, and I think that would take that for us to do. I don't think they pay for anything, but at least they work with us and let us do something nice there. That would be a good thing. But anyway, those are some of the priorities, you guys. And as I say, the document is probably about half written. Thanks to Ryan again, he's allowed us to have Scott, our intern, to begin putting the document together. And I'd say in terms of the narrative, it's probably maybe about halfway. But we still have a lot of graphics to get in, and we're trying to figure out how all that's going to happen. But anyway, the goal is to get this in front of you all and the council and the community in December. So.
One of the things was on Northwest Military too, we talked about is doing sort of the landscape medians as well.
Oh, yes.
Because you could do something like it's done, not to say Stone Oak Parkway, but one good example is like Pat Booker over there, and you see how they did those landscape medians in dividing there with not necessarily trees, but it's just all landscape and brick pavers, and it also kind of slows down traffic a little bit. So
yeah. Well, believe it or not, we visited with TxDOT, and believe it or not, they were open to us using the right of way. They don't have plans to use the right of way, and they were also open to us squeezing their lanes down a little bit to get a bike lane in. And that's what your comment about slowing traffic down. When you squeeze the lanes down, it slows traffic down. Anyway, that's where we are.
Nice. Thank you, Jack. Okay, so I think as we're coming to a close, do you have any other,
No, I just think if we're on the last agenda item about deciding what our next meetings are, I
Yes.
think it's important that we figure out a date for both November and December, because that seems like we're going to have steps towards action if we're trying to make a December recommendation to council. So
yes,
we need to make sure we have the dates in there. So.
okay. Let's do it. So yeah, now we're gonna discuss the next time.
And I know we typically have it earlier in the month, but and this is a little bit later.
Any suggestions, Ryan?
Well, personally, I mean, if I'm looking at November, the 5th is out for me, and the 19th is my birthday, and I'm out of town. So the 12th is an ideal date
12th.
for November.
Okay,
Just from my aspect, the rest is Thanksgiving. And then of course we want to focus on December being either that first or second Saturday. So of December 10th work for December 10th work for everybody?
sounds good.
Okay. So November 12th.
10,
Does that work for everybody?
perfect.
Sorry,
And
little, little booked up in November.
does anybody have any comments or? Discu- Mhm. Right. 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 Yeah, I don't know either. It's gonna get worse too, so it's not gonna get better, at least in the short term.
I mean, no, I don't know from a standpoint of, I think we've tried to look at cleaning up under sort of West and Jackson Keller there, and sort of in our jurisdiction. But obviously we don't have the resources, and we'd have to connect with probably San Antonio's trying to remember the department, the human one that trying to remember that department. But anyways, they have the means and resources to help out if necessary. But we just don't. I mean, unless it's something that
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By frost, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and then you're talking about differing jurisdictions, because I mean, everything along the access road of 410 is all TxDOT. So I mean, they would
Yeah, it's not
they
even San
probably wouldn't
Antonio,
mind
it's
if you
TxDOT,
as
yeah.
a city within our jurisdiction to where the 410 runs through, if we were to do something, they'd probably be like, sure, go ahead. And they probably do that with the city of San Antonio, but
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I know.
Right. Go and,
So it seems like we're helping in the city limits that is very.
keep it clean. So that's I think that's the main thing. Where
Do you have any insight into what San Antonio is doing, Ryan?
no, I mean, I could probably find out a little bit about what their process is, for dealing with homeless in certain areas.
Because they have
So-
some beautiful shelters.
They
You know?
do, and I think that they've had some issues closer to downtown, in and around Broadway and 37, and I think on the other side of 35 there
Yeah.
by Maine. I believe they've had some problems, but I could probably find out what they're doing to address it.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, really, only thing we can control is like we've had Public Works go down and kind of clean out the area because we do the maintenance on the vegetation and drainage down there by Jackson Keller and West underneath the bridge. And it's kind of like our domain to address if necessary. So,
Right.
but unfortunately, it does encroach. But I could find out from San Antonio what to do.
And that last clean, yeah. Yeah, yeah. That last cleanup that we did a couple weekends ago was awesome. I mean, it really cleaned up a lot, especially on like West Avenue and 410. There was a lot over there and it just looked awesome, and we cleaned up everywhere, the Highway 410 area and but a lot of trash, but I think we just gotta keep it up. Yeah.
Well, again, I'd have to say if when you say tell me what to do, I mean, if you ever feel like that you had to call PD or non-emergency number, don't hesitate because there was something that came up late yesterday, and a resident came in and somebody was on their property on a certain street trying to get in, and she decided to, I think, video it and bring it up here to show. And I'm like, no. At that point, you just call PD because
Yeah.
that's why. Yeah, and that's again why Castle Hills has the police we do, because we have the dispatch direct and we can be out there in a minute or two. So, but I mean, the officer facilitated her and did a report, but it's kind of the same thing. I would suggest anybody who ever feels that way to immediately call PD, because we can have someone out there quick. For-
Talking to himself. I've been like really polite with the guy and got him into the car.
Yeah, and I had an incident last Saturday where it was basically, you could call it encroachment from Lock Hill and someone accessing a vacant home, and some friends of mine who are residents called me and said, you can call PD, and they did, and came and took the gentleman out of the house. But but again, we do have some problem and issues like that where we do have some vacancy in homes, and but this was one in particular that was really close to the border of Castle Hills and San Antonio. So, but as soon as they called, our guys were out there in less than 2 minutes and escorted them out.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Sorry, that probably went off topic.
No, you're fine. No, this was the discussion of whatever you want to discuss right now, so. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Right.
Calling and then come to find out.
Right.
Pregnant, keep one leg. And it's like, how do you allow?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, that's when it comes into the fold where, you talked about, I saw that one time where someone was sleeping on a mattress at QT, and it's like, are they okay? And because it's just something you don't see. But then again, from a jurisdiction standpoint, it falls on the San Antonio side. But, I think over the last few years, we've been able to have a good relationship with San Antonio. So I think anything we need across the board, they're helpful to us now more than ever. So
They come to the window.
No, yeah. Smart, smart. Yeah, don't.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know, and it's important like at night because for a long time the lights weren't working, and I know the mayor was on CPS for a very long time, and I think they're all operable now after a number of calls and emails he made. Because he would literally go by at 11 or 12 and say still not working and send an email. So I think they finally got it taken care of. So
Yeah. You want to feel safe, right? Live here. Yeah.
the mayor's
Yeah.
the mayor's young. He can go take a look at those things.
All right. So our meeting is adjourned.
I'll make a
Oh,
motion- I'll make a motion to adjourn.
hey, all in favor? Adjourned. Thank y'all for being here.